This video will cover the new E-Class from a technical standpoint, with emphasis on information needed by anyone responsible for performing diagnosis and repair or otherwise requiring a technical understanding of this new model. There are 3 other videos in this series on the Model 210. One is directed to all dealer service personnel and covers the features that a customer may have questions about. You should have viewed that video before proceeding, since it presents an overview of the basic new features, and that information won't be included here. A separate video addresses only the new E-Class with diesel engine, the E300 diesel sedan. This is also a technical video directed to dealer technicians, and it covers the new diesel injection system and other under-hood changes. The final video in the series covers disassembly and assembly of the Model 210. Those areas where it differs considerably from prior models are shown, particularly if the differences can cause problems if you're not aware of them. So for this program, a technical overview, we'll start under the hood of the E320, which has the familiar 104 gas engine with the HFM engine management system. Now, although this first point may not be very exciting, with all of the high-tech changes to talk about on the 210, it sure could hold things up a while if you're trying to figure it out. The belt tensioner had to be changed to fit in the space available. It's mounted on the power steering pump bracket, and if you're looking for the means of adjusting or removing the belt, it isn't that obvious. Well, the need for any kind of basic adjustment has been eliminated. Constant belt tension is provided by mounting the tensioner pulley on a spring-loaded torsion mount, and belt removal and replacement only requires placing a 15mm wrench or socket on the nut of the tensioner pulley axle and turning clockwise to unload the tension on the belt. Here's another brain teaser. If you have to connect the gauges to the AC system, finding the low pressure port is a snap, but it may take a while to find that the high pressure port is hidden behind this cover. All right, let's look around in the engine compartment next, starting with the location of the components in the module box. A new version relay module with separate connector plugs is mounted here. This relay module includes fuses for the following functions: the air pump, the horn, the traction system installed in the vehicle, and the fuel pump. K40 also includes 2 unfused circuits to provide the current to the new HFM control module. The control module for the traction system installed, either anti-slip regulation or the electronic traction system, is located here in the module box. The HFM SFI engine control module is located here. And here's a new one, the combination control module. Now, we can spend a day talking about this module because it's responsible for so many different functions, 13 to be exact. It controls all 4 power windows, the outside mirrors, the sliding roof, the interior lamps, the entrance lamps, the interior locking switch for the central locking, the 4-way flashers, the steering column memory, the control signal for the rear window defroster, the windshield wiper control, the rear head restraints function, the residual heat function of the climate control, and the trunk lid remote release function. In addition, the combination control module is linked via an interior CAN bus to the pneumatic control unit and the 2 control modules for electric seat adjustment. It also has trouble code memory that is readable by the handheld tester, and it must be programmed on installation using the HHT. Moving to the other corner under the hood, we find a module box behind the fuses. The diagnostic module for OBD2 is found here. The OBD2 system on the Model 210 corresponds to the version in Model 202, with only minor changes to the activation requirements for a few of the trouble codes. Here's a new component, the pulse module. It controls the auxiliary fan speed, the headlamp cleaning system, and the solenoid valves and high-pressure pump of the traction system and ABS hydraulic unit. Most of the other engine-related sensors and other electrical components and their function are familiar, but there are differences in the operation of a few familiar components that should be mentioned. For example, a Hall effect sensor is now used to identify camshaft position and recognition of cylinder number 1. In conjunction with the crankshaft signal, it provides injection synchronization, anti-knock control, ignition point when starting, and fuel shutoff in case of ignition failures. Another new feature is that the crankshaft position sensor now generates its signal using a segmented ring. 2 segments have been removed at the recognition point for the ignition coil for cylinders 5 and 2. An electric air pump, as introduced on Model 202, is used instead of the belt-driven pump. The activation and function also correspond to Model 202. Now, looking inside the car, there are some features that should be pointed out. For example, the body wiring harness is separated by system, making each circuit easy to identify and follow. That will be a big help when trying to track down a possible wiring problem. The harness is installed in an H-shaped housing, as introduced in the S-Class, and routed along the floor sills. The side airbags are now an integral part of the supplemental restraint system. They reduce the pendulum load effect of the upper body during a side impact. Of course, there are some modified or new components to consider, such as a 50-pin crash sensor and left and right side acceleration sensors for sensing side impacts mounted on the cross member under each front seat. And although the ACC push-button assembly is a familiar component, it should be mentioned since it is now also the control module for the climate control. The headlight switch is now called an illumination control module, since it also replaces the separate bulb failure monitor unit, as well as housing the relay for the operation of the lamps in the alarm mode. And if the vehicle is equipped with xenon lamps, it will have this additional control module under the rear seat. The module is responsible for controlling the automatic range adjustment feature that is standard with xenon lamps. This system compensates for changes in vehicle level. Changes in vehicle level are transmitted to the control unit by 2 level sensors, one in the front and one on the rear axles. And the control unit operates servo motors to adjust the lamp reflectors as necessary. The control modules for the power seats are mounted on the seat undercarriage next to the motors. A new feature is the use of Hall effect sensors to detect seat position instead of the potentiometer used previously. The module for idle speed and cruise control is located here in the right front footwell. The version will depend on the type of traction system installed in the vehicle. The automatic transmission kickdown relay is mounted next to the idle speed and cruise control module. And the remote central locking control module is also found here in the footwell. The pneumatic system pump also has control module functions, so that must be mentioned. The control module function of the pump assembly includes signal processing for central locking, retractable head restraints, multi-contour backrests, remote trunk release, and manifold vacuum assist. In addition, it houses the rear window defrost relay and provides the function of the previously separate anti-theft alarm control module. Now let's take a look under the new E-Class. The most noticeable change found underneath is the rack and pinion steering. From a service standpoint, there are a few things that should be mentioned regarding the new steering. First of all, with the engine off, when moving the steering wheel, you will notice greater free play than with the previous recirculating ball-type steering. That's a normal characteristic, and the play is not noticeable with the engine running. And when it's necessary to identify the straight-ahead position, that's done very easily, as shown here. As far as maintenance is concerned, fill only with Mercedes-Benz power steering fluid and check the rubber boots for damage when specified. The design of the front axle is the double control arm as known from Model 202. The provisions for correcting caster and camber with repair version mounting bolts is also the same as for Model 202. But the suspension uses springs that are no longer closed and flat ground at the ends. This provides smaller production tolerances, so color coding is not necessary. Plastic braces are installed at the top of the springs. The same spring compressor used with Model 124 applies to Model 210. But there is a new special tool for measuring the front ride height of the Model 210. The rear suspension is the familiar multi-link arrangement with the link rod geometry changed somewhat. The same basic service and repair procedures apply. One exception is that the differential has a lifetime filling of high-point oil. Floating brake calipers and vented discs with a very large braking surface area are installed on the front axle. One difference from a repair standpoint is that the front caliper must be completely removed when installing brake pads. A final point about brakes. Similar to models 140 and 202, the emergency brake with automatic cable length adjustment is located under the rear seat. Moving to the transmission, the six-cylinder gas engine uses the 722.3 version automatic, and the diesel uses the .4. Both versions drive away in first gear and shift back into first shortly before coming to a full stop. The shift linkage rod is no longer threaded and has a simplified adjustment method using a set screw to lock the rod in place. The fuel system has a few changes. We find that the vane-type fuel pump has been replaced by a helical spindle pump. And looking at this interior cutaway of the fuel tank, the new lever-type sending unit can be seen. The sending unit uses a bayonet-type lock, and this special tool is required for removal and installation. A diagnostic tip. If there is an interruption in the sender-to-gauge circuit, the gauge needle will drop to 0, but the reserve light will not come on. Well, that summarizes the major technical points related to the Model 210. Of course, there are many other points that could be mentioned, but our intention is not to replace the introduction manual with this video. If you'll take the time to review the manual, you'll find that the rest is covered there.